everybody, and welcome to the podcast. My guest today is Mike Olaski. Mike is a longtime close friend of mine who I've known for over 25 years now. And one of the reasons that I decided to have Mike on as one of my very first guests for the podcast is that we've been through so many experiences together in life, going all the way back to the days when we were two teenagers playing hockey, all the way through to where we reconnected again in the early 2000s. And Mike was the person that handed me the 4-Hour Workweek book and the E-Myth, two books that were really instrumental in shaping my mind about possibilities outside of just having a job. And of course, over the years, Mike and I have owned numerous businesses together. Some of them have worked, some of them have not worked. We've been through, two different marriages. In my case, he's gone through numerous relationships. We've had our ups and downs. We've been in fist fights together before. And on this podcast, what we really dove into is just talking about some of those experiences from when we first connected and how we had different recollections of those experiences. For example, the coaches that we had over the years in hockey, people that we played hockey with that, in one case, one of our former teammates ended up taking his own life. We talked about what that meant to us and what it still means to us to this day and how it's impacted the way that we live our own lives. We also even talked about drugs on this episode. That was something that was unexpected, but at the same time, I'm glad that we dove into it. It was a natural conversation where I've been exploring the idea of ayahuasca and some of these different mind-altering drugs as a means to be able to raise my own consciousness of possibility and being able to see things in a different way. And I can tell you that over the years, that has shifted dramatically. I used to not want to have anything to do with them. And in fact, I've had lots of bad experiences actually doing different drugs over the years. And we talked about that openly on this conversation here today. And of course, we talked about a project that Mike is working on right now that's really his passion project and the thing that he's driving everything in his life around, which is the ReHabit app. And this is really about Mike's own journey of shaping and being consciously aware of and changing his own daily habits so that he can make an impact and a change in his overall life and really align with the kind of life that he truly deserves and wants to live as his best life. So, this is something that he's extremely passionate about. And the journey that he's taken to get to this point is, of course, a huge part of that process. And that's what I want to share with you here on this interview. So this is part one of a two-part series because we had a lot to talk about. I think you're going to enjoy this one. So let's go ahead and listen to the interview. Mike Olaski, welcome to the Trevor Turnbull Show. I'm excited to have you here.
Hey, excited to be here.
We were obviously bantering a little bit before flipping the record button here. And I want you to share really quickly that affirmation that you just talked about a second ago, because I think it'll set the context of what we're going to talk about here today.
All right, I will. So this is this guy named Brian Scott. He's got this YouTube podcast called Reality Revolution. He's a reality hacker, which is sort of like law of attraction in some requests, but the affirmation goes like this. Everything is working out to my advantage. Something wonderful is happening for me now. My world is taking care of me. Everything is going according to plan. Things are working out beautifully and will continue to do so with ease.
Love it. I shared mine with you with regard. We were just talking about like doing opening intros and closing outros and that type of thing for podcasts, because you and I have, collaborated and brainstormed on ideas many, many times over the years. But mine is, today is a beautiful day of opportunity. Trust that you're exactly where you're supposed to be right now. So be grateful, be curious, and be brave. So right I love starting off with that kind of intention and, spoken word. So anyways, you are my first guest. And the reason why I chose you as my first guest, and I remember we had this conversation a couple of weeks ago when I was telling you about my intention for doing this show and ultimately what's driving me to do it, because, both of us have kind of been in this entrepreneurial world for the better part of 15 years. And, we even had a podcast ourselves at one point that
I think we ended up pumping out what, 6 or 7 episodes or something, but it never really got legs, just life situation and all that kind of stuff. But the reason why I chose you as the first guest is I knew that we'd be able to dive into all of the stuff that we've gone through over the years, which is a lot of crazy stories and quite frankly, just that, stories, right? Things that are both uplifting and things that have maybe even held both of us back over the years. And then we just be able to kind of spitball on some of the learnings from that and, how it's shaped our beliefs and how it's driving even some of the projects that we're working on right now. So I'm honored to have you as my first guest, Mike.
Well, thank you. And I'll self-deprecate and say what I said to you the first time you mentioned having me on your show first. And because we did that podcast before, we know that working together, we decided to bring somebody on that we knew we could just mess it all up and it would be okay. Sort of like a trial and error show. So I am honored to be part of your trial and error show, Trevor. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so I've got a chronological order of things that I definitely want to address with you for however long we go here, because we're just going to kind of let it flow and see. But we can bounce around on these, but I wanted to start with this, and it's kind of like right in the middle. It's not at the start of our journey because, in the intro, I would have explained kind of our background and where, we got first connected and all that kind of stuff. But I feel like there's a centering point in the discussion right now, and I mentioned this to you when we chatted last time, that revolves around a spider bite. So you wrote a blog post. When was that? Was that like 2003 or 2002, something like that? Do you remember?
Yeah, well, it happened in Seoul, South Korea. So it had to be after that. That was 2005 or 6.
Okay.
It was the winter of the year of your marriage, your first marriage.
Right.
So because I was in
2006.
Korea, then Thailand, then I landed coming in hot off the ferry boat with my flip-flops at your best man wedding, no speech, no washed hair.
So it was kind of after, so going back to our original connection, like we met in like 94, I think it would have been, when we first started playing hockey together. And then kind of lost touch between like 97 to probably 2003. And then we started playing hockey together again, which is kind of what connected us. And there's a lot of pieces in between there, but so around that 2004, 2005, so you're in Korea and you went there to teach English, right? And this was kind of, and we'll jump back to some of the hockey stuff because I think that's important in this as well. But so tell the story. I want you to tell the story. And also I was trying to find the article. I don't think that website is up anymore, right? MJ Olio. Is it still live?
No, it's not. I have it on a hard drive somewhere for sure, but it wasn't the greatest story in the world, but I was just practicing writing. And at the time in 05 or 6 or whatever, this was even before I launched my first blog for business. But I just knew I wanted to publish on a website. I was just starting to use WordPress. So I had this blog called MJ Olio, which was my initials, MJO, connected to portfolio. Yeah, not my greatest creative work, but the story goes, well, I had this tiny little 1-room apartment in Seoul. It was quite nice in this big high rise and on this strip of high rises. It was a really interesting suburb south of Seoul called Bundong. And I had taken off my pants and let them fall on the ground and went to bed and woke up. And the next morning I was late for school or work. I was teaching, threw on my pants, and then I felt a sharp something. And I kind of just, what was that? And then went about my day. And as the day progressed, I started feeling odd and weird. And we were out for dinner and drinks later, and I just felt that area, and I was like, I had lymph nodes were all swollen, and then so I took my pants off to see what was going on, and I could see this sort of trail of spider bites on my leg, and so the spider bit me 3 times. At least I think it was a spider. I think I remember seeing spiders around the apartment before. And of course, I got really freaked out that it was a brown recluse and I was going to die for sure. I think I went and got some injections or something. But turns out I was fine. And then I wrote that story about it. And, I was a big, long exposition and sort of creative writing experience. But what I remember from the website was our friends back home kind of just slamming it like, have you, and there's one friend who'll go nameless, but if you're one of our friends, this impression should clue you in. Have you seen MJ Olio?
Yeah, all of our buddies will know exactly what we're talking about.
Yeah. So that was that. And actually it was neat because that blog got my first comment of all the comments ever in all blog posts I've written or whatever. And it was some lady, someone who was a fan of Nipawin Hawks and said, one of the best Hawks ever. And I remember that when I saw that published, I was surprised. I was like, who, how, why? And then I was just like really happy, like I got a compliment.
Yeah.
And that's when it kind of hit home how powerful it all was, right? Like, so that was the birth of my publishing on the interwebs.
Well, that's the reason why I wanted to start with that. Was I'm glad you articulated it the way that you did, because there was your experience and then you diving into this online space and publishing and then getting this satisfaction of like the comments and something that brought you back to almost 10 years earlier. And then also some of the judgment, I guess you want to call it, from friends and stuff that were in our small circle, this small little bubble. Because I talk about this all the time that, in the early 2000s, like social media didn't really exist. I don't know about you, but I didn't even get a cell phone, I think, until like 2006. Like I had a flip phone maybe in like 2003. And I was, doing the old texting where you had to click the button 4 times to get an S, that type of thing, right? But, this was just the starting points of, I think, some really critical trigger moments for both of us, right? Like you dove into that space first. And I remember being one of those people too, that was looking at this and thinking, what is this? Really? This guy published an article about a spider bite? Like I was in that same bucket, right? Of being that judgmental person and being like, how could you share something like that publicly? And looking back on it, it's just crazy to think. But, let's maybe use that as an opportunity to dive back into 10 years earlier and like 1994, 1995 type thing when we first met. Because you talked about the fact that, you received a comment about one of the greatest Hawks ever, and that was a time I would say that for both of us was like some of the greatest times of our life, right? Where you were on top of the world, had tons of confidence and had experiences leading up to that built that confidence, and even people that helped build it too. Do you want to maybe talk about just quickly your journey as a hockey player to that point of being a junior A kind of 18, 19-year-old in Nipawin, Saskatchewan?
To that point. Well, it all started when I was 6.
All right, let's speed it up a little bit. No, I'm kidding.
Well, I will fast forward to Nipawin, but it was, that year where we met, I was 19, and it was my first year in Nipawin. I was playing hockey in Merritt, BC, the year before, and I had a really rocky career. Personality conflicts, and it's tough, I think, for even the best of the most well-grounded individual to make it as a hockey player, because you're so beholden to the whims of your coach and the fortunes of your teammates or your line mates. And so when I found myself in Nipawin, I had actually forced the trade from Merritt, where I had just been benched for literally the whole half of the season. So the first half of the season, I was like the leading rookie scorer. And then the second half of the season, I was totally benched. Actually, Trevor, I'm going to take a minute to have you wanted to touch on something I've never talked about before, but I've been kicking around how I'm going to approach my channel, my podcast, my project, ReHabit. And I mentioned Brian Scott, this reality hacker. One way I describe reality hacking is scientific prayer. Most people would be grounded into it through law of attraction, like what the energy, karma, what energy you put out, you get back. It's very common sort of life view these days. But Joe Dispenza and Greg Braden and they talk, and Bruce Lipton, they talk about, especially Greg Braden, he references the lost scriptures and the lost modes of prayer. And it's really about visualization, having an image, emotionalization, having a felt sense of what it would feel like to have that vision. And then like that feeling in your body and taking a step towards that reality is the formula for scientific prayer, for prayer in scripture. And that year in Hockey and Merit, I remember, and the guy who was the benefactor of this prayer probably wouldn't want to hear the story, but I remember thinking like, I was bummed because he wasn't playing much. He was sort of on the flip side of me. And I was a subscriber to my mother's belief modalities then. She was a Christian. And so I prayed for him. And I did it in this way that was not like a typical prayer. It was very much like this lost mode of scientific prayer. And I really just got a felt sense of how it'd be for him to have some success, because I loved him. He was my roommate. And I not much longer, my prayers were answered, but I was the the vehicle for his ice time. So I stopped playing. He started playing. He did amazing and had a great career. I got benched and asked for a trade that summer. And there's been a handful of stories like that in my life where, something has come true that I've uttered or prayed around or had this, intense desire for. And that's what I'm actually focusing on in my project more. Now, coming back to Nipawin, I landed there, I'm 19, and it was the best year of my life, literally. Most definitely the best year of my life. If you account for like a full season of hockey, no injuries, great performance, great teammates. It was just amazing. And, I recall that year meeting you, and you were a young one, 17. I was 19. I was 2 years older than you. And, you didn't really land in my awareness too much because you were in and out of the team, right? You started the team, then you got sent down. Then at the end of the year, I think you came back. Is that right?
Yep, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. And so just for everyone who doesn't realize, like, there's plenty of parties in between, right? So we crossed paths along the way.
Yeah.
But, hockey season's long and deep, and, people come and go. And we did develop a friendship then. But the next year I was 20, and you made the team that year, and we were playing together. And I broke my leg that year, about 20 games in. And talking about how careers went up and down and how everything changes, like that really, when I look back, pretty much put a cap in my career. Like it just sent me on a path of, outcomes that were seemingly dependent on that leg breaking. And it's funny how quickly your fortunes can change in a year. And it's funny how much you can put faith in a belief that one event, predicates your outcomes. Now, while I say that out loud, I don't actually think that's the case, but it sure felt like it then, right?
Yeah.
And throughout my hockey career, it sure felt like that breaking that leg that year really was the precursor for the end of my career.
Yeah. It's kind of an analogy to all other instances and events that happen over the years beyond that too, right? Because at that point, you're a hockey player. Like I know, speaking from my own perspective, like when I was 18, that's all I was. Like that's all I lived for. That's all I did. And if something, like for me, for you, it was breaking a leg. For me, like my experience in that time was being 17 and not making the team, but then coming back at the end of the year and coming in with lots of excitement and build up in my 18-year-old year. And I only played half the season. I don't even know if you remember that, but I played half the season and I got sent down to junior B. That was like breaking a leg for me in the same kind of context.
18
right?
year when I was 20.
Yeah. Yeah.
No.
I spent half a season in Canistino, Saskatchewan.
Did you come back at the end of that year?
I came back at the end. I think I came back at the end of that year. I don't even remember, but I remember at the time it being just like devastating and thinking like, oh my Lord, I spent 18 years to get to this point. Now I'm playing in this junior B league right now, fighting every second game. Like was a major gut blow. But then, fast forward a couple years later, and I'm in Kindersley, and then I'm in Minot, and then I'm the captain of that team, and like it just shaped the rest of my identity in hockey. So, but I can relate to the idea of like at the time it feeling like it was just a devastating blow to your identity and what your future might look like. Really quickly, because I want to make sure that we address this too. Talk about some of the people at that time that were super impactful for you. The two that come to mind obviously is Bruce Thompson and Kyle Miller. Let's talk about both of those guys and what they did in shaping some of your beliefs and just the way that just the way that your journey ended up going.
Yeah, well, any hockey team is a cast of characters, but this team I felt was particularly close. And Bruce Thompson, it was his first year in Nipawin. And as I mentioned, I forced a trade from from Merritt. And because I forced a trade, Merritt didn't have much of a bargaining hand. And so Bruce had heard that I was available and traded this guy that his nickname was Pile of Puke. That's how mean we are in junior hockey.
Which really quick, it's crazy to think back then, like it wasn't like there was the internet or social media to find out that Mike Olaski's available in Merritt, BC. Like, do you remember how he knew that? Like, did he have a contact that was like a coach in Merritt that he used to know or something?
You know what? I'm trying to remember. I remember the first phone call I had with Bruce, and then Reggie Strange called me a few hours later. He told me, I think that he was scouting the summer camps in Kelowna. So there was these summer camps in Kelowna where you were just all the junior hockey players would come and play each other for a week or two, and people would come watch and get a sense of everything. And I think at that camp I had already made it known, so he would have picked it up then. Gotcha. And then he went home and started working on it. But he traded for me, and he likes to say that it was the best trade he ever made. But like I said, he had a really strong hand. So anyway, Bruce Thompson, it was his first year in Nipawin, and I think it was his first year as a head coach. He was an assistant coach in Weyburn. Really old school, like Detroit Red Wing coach, Babcock, old school, like gritty, and mean sometimes, but also a best friend. Like we got in fights at his wedding and like just had the best times ever. And I think the game I broke my leg, he literally kicked me in the ass on the bench because I just finished dangling up the ice. I didn't pass the puck. And
on one knee at one point?
Yeah, and he kicked me in the ass. Like, come on, like get your head out of your ass. And then we scored a goal with Reggie, and he was like, okay, that's better. And then I went and dangled up the ice like a play later and broke my leg because of it, because I got collapsed on by two people. But Bruce was a great find, and it's a good example of how hockey and team sports are so you're so bound by the fortune of the people around you, and you're fortunate to be around people of value. And for you had a different experience with Bruce, but for me, and I always try to bring you over to the Brewster side. And I respect your journey, your experience. Certainly I can see how that would have, that Bruce's character could have felt like that for someone who didn't happen to have this best trade ever cloaking, So I had opportunity right out of the gate, which was amazing. And I was fortunate enough to put on the line from day one with this guy named Kyle Miller. He too was also a find of Bruce Thompson's. He recruited him out of Manitoba. And Kyle Miller was this big, lanky, awkward, crazy dude. We're all crazy, honestly. And but we hit it off as friends and line mates. And we had a fantastic year. He led the league in scoring, and I think finished 10th or so. and he was the MVP. And he
I
would
was just laughing because, you cracked the top 10 in junior? Because remember our senior year when you were like 1 point away or
I
something
tried to
like that?
chisel a point to get in the top 10.
We'll talk
There's
about that.
something I have never shared before, but it's true. I was sitting in the penalty box saying to my own scorekeeper, give me a point. I'm 1 point out of the top 10, like a hard chisel, not a soft one where it's like from 10.
Just a straight up, just forge it.
Yeah, like find me 11,000 votes in Georgia. But anyway, Kyle, when you brought those two up, I was like, shit, you're gonna make me cry, like Jerry Maguire interview, tragic bass fishing accident.
Yeah.
But Kyle actually ended up committing suicide, and I didn't find out for a year or two after. And it was devastating for me because, he had spent a lot of time with me after. We'd almost played to college together. He recruited me to go to his college school. And I just think about, those times, how many things you go through as a young man, literally at 19, like as a hockey player. Like maybe if you're just typical, high school, I'm going to university and I got some marketing classes, it's not the same. But for us, like you were mentioning, being on top of the world, talk of the town, girls, friends everywhere you could imagine, and so much drinking and so much pride and so much drama and so much shame sometimes too, because you're either, do something when you're drunk that you're ashamed of, or do something when you're sober that you're ashamed of, or don't make a team and you're ashamed of that, or you make a bad play. Like there is a shame component. And and the reason why I'm bringing that up is because Kyle suffered from that. And so have I over time. And there's the part of the ReHabit journey I'm on is about reframing your own relationship with yourself. Because at 47, halfway home, at least, hopefully we get 300 years out of our rapidly progressing technology. But you reflect on the ages of your grandma and your grandpa, and you think, all right, I guess maybe I'm halfway. And it was a time of great influence, and so many beliefs got formed in those years. And when I moved to Korea, was out of my extremely clear desire to put away who I was back then. So I was like you, fighting a lot. And I had suffered a lot of injuries from fighting, but one of them, which one was it? This side? This side. I shattered this orbital. I just got punched so many times right in this eye here. Yeah. It was fairly epic. You were there.
I remember that night. Yeah, I think I was inside and you were out in the alley at the local watering hole.
I was locked out in the alley. And after that night, I decided, no more. I'm not doing that anymore. And so I kind of quit drinking around then. And I told myself I'd never fight again. I did get in one more fight at the same bar about a couple months later. But that was pretty comical too. And I survived, and it went well. And it was a wake up call, that one, because just the way it went down, it was like the cherry on top, like, okay, I'm done, enough, and so the belief of who I was then was, at the time I was a hockey player. Till that time, I left Saskatoon for Korea, and I haven't been a hockey player since. I still play hockey from time to time, but
26, 27 or something then?
Yeah.
Probably. Yeah. Maybe a little older even. Yeah.
Yeah. And we played summer leagues or whatever from time to time, but not much. And you might remember I was kind of always hesitant, like the odd time I'd go and it'd be kind of fun, but never wanted to get back into the dynamics of everybody jostling for ice time and getting points and chipping at each other, and like just too many triggers.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and so going back to the Nipawin days, because you mentioned Bruce and my experience too, and I haven't talked about this publicly really either before. And of course, I'm sure Bruce will probably end up watching this, but you and I have talked about this numerous times about our experience in junior hockey and how it's seemingly like you had such a great relationship with Bruce and you had a lot of things that were lifting you up and you ended up getting your scholarship and that type of thing. And for the longest time, I looked at my experience as like, I was like, without being conceited, but like I was the stud all the way from like 6 years old up until that point, like even being listed and being in Prince Albert and stuff. And it seemed like my whole world just collapsed around me in like a year and a half, and I held on to that story as like something that's number one drove me, but two that held me back because dude, I remember in my 19-year-old year when I went down to Kinistino and then this is how my journey went, but I got picked up by Kindersley because the coach in Kinistino ended up becoming the head coach in Kindersley. And I went there and spent 3 months there and then got traded. And I remember that summer leading up to the 19-year-old year, and I was in the gym every single day. And the only thing I still remember it, man, being on the bench and just going like, fuck you, Bruce Thompson. I'm going to fucking show you. Like, seriously, man, it was in my head. Like it was the thing that drove me. Yeah. And I look at it now and I'm sure Bruce is maybe laughing when he hears me say that, but like I fucking hated Bruce Thompson when I was 18 and 17 years old. And now looking back, and this is probably 10 years ago when I came to terms with this, I was like, what my experience in working with Bruce was probably one of the greatest gifts that I ever received because it gave me the opportunity to face a challenge that I'd never faced before because everything was just handed to me before that, Yeah. And I can see how it's actually shaped who I am now. But there had to be a moments of like forgiveness for like me and for him even too, because I know Bruce didn't have any ill will towards like making sure that my life was destroyed. It was quite the opposite. He probably saw something in me and said, you're not giving everything. You have more. And I can see numerous times in my life where I challenge myself on that now, where I'm like, why are you playing small, to kind of use the terminology. But I just wanted to kind of frame that because I knew that we both had different experiences coming out of that. And, if you want to jump ahead even a little bit in between like 97 to 99, it feels like we're going through the chronological order here. But when you left and then went to college, that was a whole nother experience that kind of shaped your beliefs. And even the Olympic team experience, right? Which no longer exists, but there was an actual Canadian Olympic team for hockey at one point that Mike played for too. So maybe speak about that and just that journey and some of the things that shaped your belief and maybe some people along the way that were a part of it.
Sure. Well, first I'll share an insight I had as you were speaking. And, I guarantee you, Bruce, will get a kick out of that because that is the either intended or the happy coincidental result of letting someone go and cutting them, right? Like, yeah. At some point, not everyone can make the team, right? And so then the individual's journey takes over, and you had perseverance, and great for you. And then I thought to myself, I had mentioned earlier that I had gotten an opportunity with Bruce right out of the gate, and I executed in that opportunity. But there's been other times where I got the opportunity and fell flat. And for example, when I went to college, and so I wonder if that story for me was like, oh, I didn't get the opportunity, or, woe is me, poor me. Only if I got the opportunity, I could have done better. And, I definitely put in the time, like you did too. Like they used to call me extra credit a little bit at college because I'd always be riding a bike and last guy on the ice. And that was always me. I just had a really strong work ethic. I was just really passionate about learning and developing new skills. And
yeah, you were out dangling. When I twisted my ankle when I was 18, you were out dangling on the ice at 10 a.m. when I was out there doing drills, trying to get back up to speed again.
Yeah. I mean, that was just part of my whole persona. I was always scratching for extra ice wherever I could find it. going back to when I was in prep school in 9th grade, I got special access to our in-house private school hockey rink, and I could go play during study hour instead of studying because my grades were good enough. And that was amazing to play by yourself at 8 o'clock at night. But anyway, in college, well, I broke my leg. It was November 11th, 1995. And it was Remembrance Day, and that's how I remember it. And then I missed the whole year. There was hope I might play again that year, but I hadn't even got my cast off by the time we finished our last game in the playoffs that year. I stuck around all year round, and to Bruce's credit, I really wanted to stick around, but they let me stay. And very often they might have sent you home, but I stuck around. I did radio color commentary. We would have met again along the way.
Dude, I totally forgot about that, but I did tons of color while I was sitting up in the stands too.
Yeah, that was
on
fun.
The radio. And I think about that. That was a huge shaper of my, ability to just speak, whether it be presentations or doing this right now,
My mom used to say, and to this day, I clear my mouth because she would say, I could hear you on the radio and it sounds like there's marbles in your mouth. and every now and then, and if it weren't that, it was my dad saying I was skating like a pierogi. But so that's funny what comes back to you. But so that year I missed. And then that summer, I actually didn't start skating till August or so, July. And hockey camp in college was in late August, early September. And I was on the first line. I was the top recruit in the country. I was leading the league in scoring when I broke my leg. First line, and practice was going okay, and they put me into the first game, and I just stunk. Yeah. And the coach, how he was, like, literally, he dropped me a line next game. I stunk again. He dropped me a line next game. I went our next weekend trip. And then I stunk that game. I was on fourth line for the next 2 years. I didn't get another sniff. I didn't get another break until and so I got like a goal and 4 assists the first year. And I had 100 the year before. And 4 years later, the guy who was first recruit for my team was Chris Kunitz, who's won a bunch of Stanley Cups and like with the Pittsburgh Penguins. And so you make comparisons, which is a bad problem of mine. Of like, all right, well, fuck, I guess that was supposed to be me, but he's amazing, and he did everything he needed to have all the success he did, and obviously I didn't. But I remember saying to my coach, who I hated, like the same way you hated Bruce Thompson.
Yeah.
And I walked into his office that year at the end of the year, and I was starting to inch my way up, and like I was doing extra credit, and he would come out and say, he'd see me dangling before practice, and he'd say, those aren't the hands of a 1-goal scorer. I'm like, well, then play me some more. Yeah. And he's like, you paid your dues more than anyone. I'm like, all right, so play me some more. A couple flirts with playing more. Like I got a shot at one game, but I was so out of shape that I was winded the whole time. So I'm like, you're going to need to give me a couple of games to get my legs back, Yeah. But at the end of that year, I had already heard from Bruce Thompson, who actually advocated for me to go to this Team Canada spring camp. It wasn't the Olympic team exactly. It's called the Men's National Program. But and so he already secured an invite to that camp. And it's just a spring invitational. Like a lot of people could go if you had any kind of credentials. But he got me invited. And I told my coach at our end of season meetings, I was like, I think I'm going to leave. I'm going to go to this college, to this Team Canada camp. And if I make it, I'm going to leave. And he told me, well, we can play you more when you come back next year. I promise we'll play you more. This was going into my senior year. And I remember I said to him, like, my best friend in college that year benefited from my failure to execute it. And he was a great player too, no doubt about it. But there's an opening on the depth chart when he fought a fourth line. And he had like 30 points, a point a game. I said to my coach, how many points did my friend have? He goes, 30. I'm like, how many on the power play? He's like, 15. I'm like, okay, so he got 15 points in regular shift and he plays how many minutes per game? All right, how many points did I have? He's like 11. I'm like, how many on the power play? He says 0. So I got 11 points and I got how many minutes per ice per game? I said, I'm outperforming him on 5-on-5. And so that was a light bulb for him in that moment. But I didn't trust that he was going to play me any more than he was. And when I went to spring camp at Team Canada, it was revelatory. It was honestly probably one of the best moments of my life because it was such a redemption. And I played at that camp like I played when I was 19 with you in Nipwood, or those college camps, or just dangling and skating and flying and confident and making friends and talking to everybody and feeling good. And someone, one of the coaches who now coaches in the NHL says to me, he's like, how did you only get 10 points last year? And I said, ice time. But the truth is, it's more than just ice time. It's also ice time and confidence. And, it's funny where confidence is born. You might expect it's born from getting ice time and having success, but that also is part of the program I'm developing, ReHabit. And when you have a hole in yourself that is unable to manufacture confidence in yourself outside of influences, then you're always going to be subject to the circumstances you find yourself in. And that was my case. If I didn't get ice time, my analytical brain started analyzing, evaluating, contemplating all these outcomes, and I went to shit fast. If I was getting ice time and external confidence, I was at the top of my game relatively fast.
But in that case, it was dependent on somebody else giving you the validation of like, you are good enough to justify that ice time.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So the, obviously like this is exactly how I intended our conversation to go. Cause I knew we'd kind of weave in these old stories that, we've talked about these things numerous times. We've just never recorded it before. The idea of all these things that have shaped us to bring us to today, which of course we'll get to today by the end of this interview, but let's keep going down that journey unless there's anything else you want to share around the Olympic experience. But obviously this is like timeline, like 98, 99 type thing to like early 2000s that I want to kind of dive into now. Or anything else you want to share about that experience from the Olympic team perspective?
Well, I mean, that spring was redemption on top of the world. And in fact, I used that event as a anchor in my practice for NLP tools when neuro-linguistic programming is part of my ReHabit program, is to have a visual, an emotional, a physical model that you can map onto and recall and embody again. Because that spring in 1998 was so powerful for me. It just felt like, but that summer went by, and then the fall camp came along. And I actually went down to school first. I started the year in Ferris, and then I left that school and then went to the national team camp. And so it created this environment where they were waiting to see if I'd come back or not. And so when I was at the camp, I had some success. I did pretty well, maybe not quite as well as the spring. I definitely made the team, but there was a moment where I actually got the sense that they tried on my psychology. In fact, we had a psychologist on team. His name was, I can't remember his name, but he was the father of Jason Botterill, who played in Michigan and played a little bit in the NHL. And he was a psychologist, and he was there to help us improve our psychology. And before the Canadian national team, like we just worked out so hard and practiced so hard. It was just intense. It's like NHL camps, like, and 2 a days. And it was like college was a big jump from junior, but Team Canada was a big jump from college. And the psychology profile was such an eye-opener for me. At the time, I wasn't able to really pull the dots together, but I remember thinking back that they actually challenged me psychologically. I think they expressly benched me to see how I would respond. And before then, it didn't dawn on me that people would do that. I always thought you would get benched because you weren't playing well or you were out drinking all night the night before or something. But lo and behold, that mechanism of mine started playing in, and I started playing worse. And so I played my way off the team. So I played 10 games that year. I didn't get to go travel overseas. And, no regrets. I think I put in a good effort, but by the time that I was done, I thought, well, maybe I'll go back to school. And I wasn't sure I wanted to. I thought I was going to go play pro, but it turns out my coach at college, the guy who wasn't going to play me anyway, actually decided not to let me back, not to bring me back to play. And, there was a lot of stories around that too. Like, namely, I didn't call them enough to let them know how I was doing. I remember thinking like this, what are we, high school prom date? Like, what?
Got to check in.
I'm doing my business here. I'll let you know if and when it ends, or, you'll figure it out. I'm coming back or not, if I come back or not. Like, didn't dawn on me I needed to check back in. But, and then there was a few players back there that I think were offended that I had left and also didn't want me back. So I went and played pro that year. Didn't get much ice time that year. Really quickly, I went to Wichita for 3 games while I was waiting for a contract in Europe, because I wanted to go to England or Germany. I had in my head what I wanted to do. So I went back to Ferris, didn't play there, went to Wichita for 3 games, got 3 goals, was playing quite well, and didn't feel comfortable there, and pulled the plug and left. And went back to Ferris, sat there for a little while, and then ended up in Mobile, Alabama in East Coast League. And by the time I got there, it was almost like I broke my leg again. By the time I got a shot, I sucked, and I didn't play much for 52 games. I got in the 52 games I needed to get in order to have 75% of an East Coast League under my belt so I could go to England, which of course I never did. And again, there's another belief that I felt like I have to go play in England for some reason. Yeah. So I have to be in the East Coast League. So I have to get these 75% of these games in. So I just, persevered and kept playing in a situation that wasn't right for me. Maybe I would have forced a trade or something. But from there, I just 5 games there, 5 games here, 5 games there, and then it was over. And then I ended up playing with you senior hockey in Lucky Lake. And that's how we came back to being buds.
Yeah. There's so many, I'll spare, because I want this to be about you here, but I'll talk about this in future solo episodes, just my own journey and my hockey career, and, the attachments that I had to my identity of either coaches projecting onto me or me having certain expectations of myself. And I remember just quickly, when I was 20, I was supposedly told that I was one of 2 people that were on the short list of getting a scholarship at Omaha, Nebraska. And they ended up taking the other guy. And I remember I fought that guy in my 18-year-old year or something. And I kicked his ass too. But anyways, I remember just feeling so dejected then too, and thinking oh my God, everything that I've worked for these last 4 years was to get a scholarship. And then it didn't happen. And then it just took me down this other path. And there's so many triggering, events that built from that help shape who I am today. So I'm grateful for all of it. But again, at the time, devastating, self-worth was shot. My future vision of myself was shot, everything. And you talked about having a psychologist on the team. That was hockey teams didn't have psychologists and mental coaches back then, you know, like that was probably the level you had to get to in order to have that come in, right? It was certainly wasn't something that was talked about in junior hockey. If it was maybe a guy came in once, or I laugh about this because every time I hear this song, but like that Phil Collins song, when we used to lie on the ground and turn the lights off in the dressing room, Bruce, we used to put that on. Like that was about as much mindset work as we used to get into, right? It was kind of like, it was kind of like meditating before a game, but really it was intended on like just having that buildup of the drum solo.
It's more superstition, more superstition and mindset back then.
Yeah. So, but what comes to mind for me is, cause maybe we'll back off the hockey a little bit now. We'll talk about how it led you down this path in the early 2000s, because what I remember though, too, when I reconnected with you was that you were just finishing up your arts degree, right? So you went back to school through other means of academic scholarship, right? And then got that degree. And that, to me, that was probably one of the most critical pieces to you ending up with going into the online world and writing and creating websites and that type of thing. Hey.
Yeah, for sure. Well, it turns out I ended up going to the same school in a matter of a roundabout way. The NCAA had a program called the Degree Completion Program, and it's just for people just like myself who left early to go play pro or whatever. And so you have to qualify, and of course my grades were good enough that I did. It took me a year, actually. We played, I think you might remember this. We were in Lucky Lake that year playing, and I was like, I was having fun, but I was like, what am I doing here? So I packed up my car. I was like, I got it. Again, a story. I had a drive. I was like, I got to finish my degree. Like, if I don't finish it now, I'm never going to. So the only way I could think of it was like, go back to where I was and see what I can do. So there was a school called Kendall College in Grand Rapids. I went to Ferris State in Big Rapids, Michigan. Wow, central western Michigan. And Ferris State ended up buying Kendall. So I actually ended up graduating from the same school I went to. But the original degree I was in was called visual communications, basically graphic design. And we had everything was digital, shifting over to digital then for the first time ever. Really, it was a lot. My teachers were really old school designers, but the computer and the internet, like this is 95, right?
Yeah.
And so when I went back, it was 2000. And so I spent that year 2000 really scrambling and scrounging. I took 1 or 2 classes at Kendall, and they're very expensive for out of state, like really expensive. Like my scholarship was worth something like 200,000 Canadian dollars, because if you pay the out of state tuition, it's just astronomical.
It's crazy. Yeah.
And so I paid for 2 classes at Kendall, and then I went to a community college in Grand Rapids and got 2 more credits. I think they were just like, I can't remember. I transferred them in, and that got me to the point where I needed 1 more year worth of credits to graduate. And the whole time, like, I'm living off of ramen. I think I was going to food. I literally went to a food line, like a food shelter. What's the word I'm looking for? Like,
Soup
I can't remember
kitchen type thing, or
soup
like
kitchen. There's a thing.
Yeah.
There's a place in Saskatoon. I'm trying to remember the specific name of it, but got food from there. I was living in this studio apartment in downtown East Grand Rapids, where it was like old, like really run down, and then writing this application for this grant. I actually missed an application for another one that I was so devastated by. Like, I was like, I forgot it was the different day, and I came in the next day. I'm like, here you go, and like, deadline was yesterday. I'm like, what? Give me a break. I tried to fast talk my way out of it, and they're like, no. But thankfully, I got the degree completion program, and then the next year came back, and I had the full boat again. So my classes were paid for, and I had room and board, and so I was able to finish the degree. And that one was called, that one was a different degree. It was more multimedia. We did 3D work and a lot of website, a lot of programming, a lot of animation. And yeah, so when I finished that, a lot of video editing, video production. And so if it were not for that, I would have potentially not been down this road. And That was 2002 when I graduated. And the company I had coming out of the gate was Five Sides, and it had a logo that was the exact same as one website, except it was missing a chunk, which is basically like the Trivial Pursuit logo, little pie chart, but it wasn't much of a logo. But it's funny, like that the spectrum and that sacred geometry is still plays a large role in every design I do, pretty much. Like I'm really fascinated by the sacred geometry, and but yeah, that's what got me into it, and then I came back and played more senior hockey with you for a few more years.
Yeah, and that was like early 2000s then, so like 2003, 4, 5 type thing. I think we still played senior hockey. And like for anybody that is listening, watching this, that has no clue what we're talking about, like senior hockey is not like over 55. We're talking like, 17-year-olds up to 50-year-olds that are playing organized hockey in Saskatchewan in towns with 300 people, where they pay what they called imports, or like their hired guns, to come in and kind of bolster a local team, right? So you'd have a town of 300 people that had enough young hockey players to fuel a team, and then you would bring in these like hired guns. So Mike and I were 2 hired guns at the time, and man, I like that doesn't exist anywhere else on the planet. Like thinking back about that, like we'd make a couple $100 a game, and it was basically paying for drinks at the bar. Pretty much. It wasn't really paying for our rent, but that was a good time. But right around that time though, too, I know early 2000s type things. So you started Five Sides, and you're doing this stuff, and I can't remember if you were taking on clients or anything at that point, or if you're already diving into the blogging side of things. I think that was around the time that you went to Korea, right? And for me, I came out of university with a marketing degree and just went straight into a sales job, and was hitting the phones and driving around and going to networking events. And that was kind of both of our paths for a couple of years there, right? And I remember you started to plant some seeds in my head around that time too, where there was some books. And I don't remember if the E-Myth came out at this time, or if it was just something that you read and you were like, hey, you should read this. And I was like, all right, I guess so. And the 4-Hour Work Week. And do you remember what other kind of books in particular were influential for you early on in those stages, where you were thinking about like how to build a business around your experience that you gained through university?
Oh, well, it's funny. There were a few, and you mentioned them for books about building business, E-Myth and 4-Hour Work Week. And there probably wasn't a whole lot more at that time in that area. I was focused more on like quantum mechanics and astrophysics, and
I remember you talking about that stuff back then, and me just going,
I spent a lot.
Wasn't letting it in yet.
Those senior hockey years was a lot of hockey, a lot of weed, a lot of guitar, and a lot of just blowing my own mind, So I would do all three at the same time if possible, while sketching and playing Tony Hawk on PlayStation. Tough life for a 26-year-old if you can get it. Tough work if you can get it. But I think we spent 2 years like that. But there was probably the most influential books for me in that moment was Eckhart Tolle, and I read it really early. Hang on, I just want to see if I'm a liar, because that's my recollection. I think I read
referring to, right?
The Power Now was the first book I read.
Yeah.
I can't remember who recommended it to me. And, that's what really started to pull together all these, 2004 it came out. So yeah, definitely. And that's what really started to, you wouldn't think that's a book about business. But for me, it was like, if it went 4-Hour Work Week, the E-Myth, and Power Now, those might be the three, because it kind of went from like, hey, how can I have a lifestyle business? How can I build a business functionally that I'm not a slave to? And, how can I feel good about myself, and how can I make an impact in the world? And that's what was driving me then, is like, I want to be happy, right? Like, I don't want to build $1 billion business, although I would have aspirations in that area. Like, well, maybe this business could be huge. I don't know. But when I roped you into the space, I was basically thinking like, dude, you're on a track that has no leverage points. And I was all about that leverage. Like, 4-hour work week's about creating passive revenue streams. Oh, that's another one, is the passive income. I think it's I'll have to see who wrote that book. I'm just, for everyone who's not watching, I'm Googling as we speak. But it's a great book. And I think it's called Multiple Streams of Income. And it really guided me towards thinking about the blogging back then, which is really why I was pitching you to join me as a business partner in the website development company, because obviously you're doing sales. And I was like, all right, good, you can do sales. You also had a lot of skill in managing the areas. You complemented my deficiencies well. I recognized that early. And like typos or book work. And so the Power of Now, I think, was the one that tied it all together for me, and really got me on this idea of like, how can I change my life up? That's when I started this master cleanse. I wanted to fast. I wanted to challenge myself. I wanted to change the way I was looking at things. This is why cannabis became so important to me, not because I was just necessarily distracting myself from life, but I was able to actually look at life in a different way. And I was just thinking about this today. I mean, how much has changed in those 15 years, how many people actually now respect cannabis and psychedelics as a conduit to not only treating, depression, anxiety, but also as an access point to peak performance. So you can actually achieve an experience that you can model. For example, my experience with the national team, I had a moment where someone said something and I felt it, and I could remember me doing it, and it was just clear as day and bright and bold and beautiful. But a lot of people never have that experience.
Yeah.
And so one thing that drugs can do is provide an experience that it might be hard to acquire otherwise. You're not going to become a professional hockey player playing for the national team in an evening in your living room and then acquire a new view on the world like that, So I've often said, I think everyone should do drugs. I think they should be legal. Every drug should be legal. We should finance, instead of incarcerating, we should be financing the small percentage of people that develop a problem with it, get them the support they need to understand how to use it in a meaningful way. Much more beneficial to society on every level, but I digress.
Well, on that point though, we've had lots of discussions about this over the years, because I can say that in the early 2000s was kind of like the first time that I was ever even introduced to, I shouldn't say that. I think I smoked weed, Mom and Dad, if you're listening, I smoked weed for the first time.
And I tried many times.
Like 97, I think. Yeah, 97, 98, somewhere in there. And then not again until probably like 2003 or something. And in both cases, I ended up like, the first time I fell asleep within like 5 minutes and just whatever, like it just put me to sleep. The second time I was like hunched over a toilet for hours. And then, I think I maybe tried it 2 or 3 times since then. I've had a very similar experience. So I've got this idea in my head that like drugs don't agree with me. They're bad. And it's fine. It is what it is. But what I'm getting to though, is that everything that you just spoke of there, though, if I was to transport myself back to 2003 mind, like who I was back then, I'd think like, that's crazy talk, Mike. You're talking about drugs, man. Drugs are illegal. You know what I mean? And now I'm finding myself listening to podcasts about people's experiences with ayahuasca, and I'm going, I think I need to try this. So
but
it's
even MDMA,
years,
we were taking ecstasy back then, and we weren't having peak experiences. I mean, we were, But like now, when I look at the drugs, back then there was a lot of just like we're partying. There's certainly a lot of that. But now, when I
Yeah.
would consider a drug like LSD, ayahuasca, even MDMA, even um, did I say mushrooms? But
No.
you can microdose them for sure. But even if you macrodose them, if you have an intention for that experience beyond like dance and party and getting laid, like, but actually you're going to go on a journey and explore where it takes you in the realm of consciousness and what it reveals to you about who you are and how you see the world. Like it's beautiful. Now there's certainly room for like rock on, like party a little, have fun. And that's part of what I think is critically important and missing. Everyone's taking themselves so seriously these days, myself included, perhaps. You know, you need to have fun, but you do need to recognize there's risks with everything. And what I continue to tell you about your drug experience is that the first 5 times you chewed tobacco, you probably threw up, but you kept on trying it. And the first 10 times you drank alcohol, you probably threw up, but you kept on trying it. You're a quitter. You're a drug quitter. You need to persevere. And so, you know,
it's been the journey for sure. And that's why I say openly right now that like, I know the next 10 years of my life will be experiencing some of these things. And, you know, like the ayahuasca thing in particular, I'm literally just going to school on it right now, where at one point it's just like, nope, not a chance. That's not what I do. You know, other people do that. Now I'm like, huh. So, you know, open your mind up to a new alternate reality that you can't see without going down that journey. Okay, I'm into that. Like that's the driver now for me, right? It's like seeing things differently.
Well, you're gonna benefit from the dramatic difference in experience in ayahuasca. I've never taken ayahuasca. I too want to. But because it's not smoking a random strain of weed at a party in the mix of drinking, and that's why I always tell everyone with their pot experiences, most of the time you take what's given, you don't know what it is. The strains are so variable. And the strains are really important for who you are as a person, not only biochemically, but also psychologically. So there's like these 3 legs, this tripod of influences of the experience you'll have with cannabis. And if you're not aware of that, I mean, I wasn't when I was in 2002, you know, playing guitar and reading quantum physics. I was taking what I got. But, you know, in the last 10 years living in Vancouver, I go to the store and I have a menu of 50 different strains with like the user experiences of how they impact you and the cannabinoid breakdowns. And like, you know, it's a whole different story. So choosing the right strain and the right delivery vehicle will make cannabis use a little bit more like ayahuasca. But ayahuasca is such a game changer. Like you're not smoking. I mean, and it's not like a little, you know, you're not dipping a toe. You're going full boat into another realm. And so I do want to do that one day myself. Maybe if this show ever gets to the 1000th episode and you're hosting Joe Rogan, we can all do it together.
Well, I'm saying this show will get to, you know, beyond that, but that will be one of the things that I'll talk about over the years is
truth or bull. Did I just speak with limiting belief?
You did.
I just spoke.
You did speak with limiting belief because it is something that I've created as an intention for this. It's part of the reason why in the closing outro of this show, you'll hear me talk about be grateful, be curious, and be brave. And be brave is part of that. It's literally like, sky's the limit, man. Who do I want to have on this show? Obama? Awesome. I'm going to have Obama on my show in the future. You know what I mean? So hell yeah, man. Let's create that intention. At some point we will go and do ayahuasca with Joe Rogan.
All right.
We'll see when it,
Which, by the way, I want to say, and I've been wanting to say since you said it on our call before this interview, was your little tagline there. I love it. Be grateful, be curious, be brave, right?
Yeah.
And so there's a flagship piece in ReHabit that I'm calling Emote Control. And basically it's to, and the more accessible name is How to Feel Better. But controlling your emotions, or at least recognizing your emotions, is so important. No one teaches it. School's a joke. Like, these are the things we need to be learning at school. Like, there's a spectrum of these emotions, and they categorize. And in my life, doing, search engine optimization and latent semantic indexing of any topical, any set of topics, has got me along these lines of just sort of categorizing things. And so I set out to, like, all right, I wanted to get to know, like, what are my emotions? Like, what are the range of the emotions? And in my experience of learning about emotions, there's a lot of great teachers out there. Like Esther Hicks has this persona, Abraham Hicks, and she has these a lot of talk along these lines. Joe Dispenza talks along these lines. So many people talk along these lines, but on this scale of emotions, from the worst one you can feel to the most elated one you can feel, and everywhere in between, there's naturally a middle. And Bruce Lipton and Dr. Hawkins rather, have a energy associated to each emotion. And in the middle is you might think neutral. All right, makes sense, but it's actually either the one in the middle or the one on one notch from 0 to 1 on positive, and that's curiosity. And curiosity is a great place to go to when you're in a bottom emotion, because it's neutral. It's not a big leap. Like, I got to feel better. Like I should be like, I'm happy. You're affirming all these things, but it's hard to leap out of that spiral you're in. So curiosity is amazing. And then gratitude is much higher on the scale, but it's also a really great access point. Because if you can get curious, in fact, there's this little technique I have that I think it's called the wait method. And I go, wait, where am I triggered? So, and then as soon as you get into that space and you ask that question by definition is curiosity. Curiosity is asking a question. So if you can get in the space where it's like, what's that smell? Or, I hear something. What is that? That immediately draws you out of whatever negative emotional pattern you're in into curiosity. And then if you can leap to gratitude from there, you're on your way. And so those two, to me, are the two major ladders of leveling up your emotion in any one place you might be.
Yeah, I'd never thought of that, actually, in the hierarchy, the ladder of, like, it really is kind of like, be brave, face that fear, the thing that's the limiting belief, whatever, right? Be curious about possibility, and then be grateful for whatever it is and whatever it then created that becomes new, right? Whatever that new reality is. And I know Danielle Grant, who's a mindset mentor and somebody that I've had in my programs, she talks about the 3 questions that you should ask yourself in all situations of that, where there may be fear involved and you need to be brave. It's like, what am I believing to be true? Why do I believe this to be true? And what do I want to choose to believe differently? That's it. If you ask yourself those 3 questions around every single situation that comes up, you can start to program yourself to condition to think differently, right? And it's obviously a very basic exercise, but it does kind of map to what we just talked about there, which is like, step 1 is just be brave to face the thing that you maybe can't even see is holding you back from living your greatest life, and that's part of the bravery, is to just say, I don't know, or I don't understand. It's kind of like me with drugs, right? It's like, my experience is I get sick. Okay, that's a belief, that's a limiting story. There, I see all kinds of proof and published scientific journals and people that I respect that are going down this journey. And now that society says that it's legal, I'm starting, you know what I mean? Like, I'm just thinking back to the years and years of, like, why did I believe that to be true, that drugs are bad back in the day? It was because I had a very condensed mindset that was like, I'm a hockey player. Like, seriously, man, for like the better part of a decade, that was how my brain worked. It's like, I'm a hockey player. What else do you do? Well, I play hockey. You know, fuck, I burnt 6 years of tuitions in university to prove it with like barely a degree coming out of that thing, you know, because I was defining myself as a hockey player in my mid-20s without a scholarship or not being drafted.
Well, you were a hockey player and a very good one. And you know, the paths we're on are beset with many obstacles. So, you know, there's I went through a journey with drugs in that mindset as well. I had some experience when I was younger, 18, but then 17, 16. But then when I was 18, 19, 20, 21, all through college, not really. It didn't do much. A little bit of mushrooms in college, a little bit of pot here or there. But when I finished school and finished hockey and I went back down and finished my degree, my roommate smoked a lot of weed and he wanted to play guitar. And I was like, yeah, why not? So
is that Joel?
No. Joel was my roommate in Ferris when I was playing hockey. This roommate was just the guy I met down there. And I ended up meeting a really, really good buddy who was good buddies with a total pothead. And so I just fell into this sort of, you know, it was an art school and there was, you know, the guy playing guitar needed a roommate. He's terrible at guitar, has lots of weed. I'm like, yeah, we'll live together. And I made a conscious choice. I will smoke a lot of weed and I will play guitar. And so out of that was born, you know, like I got my guitar right back there. Like I'm so grateful for that. And I spent hours and hours and hours playing, just lost in the process and the practice and the joy of the energy of just learning. Now, my favorite thing about guitar is just like, there's always a little victory right around the corner where you're like, I nailed that note. I got that chord. I got that progression. I got that song. I just love that about it. And I always used to say, and I still do, that my favorite drug is learning. And the reason why is because the dopamine hit is so amazing. And we have the best drug set in our body. So if you can actually have that emote control, you can trigger these euphoric states without the drugs. The drugs are just a shortcut to get in there, which, by the way, I'll drop some really great books these days, like Stealing Fire. It's very, very popular. But the co-author of that book, he has written a ton of great books on peak performance. I can't remember his name right offhand. But you know, there was something that about the what you were just talking about, Trevor, that I wanted to loop back to. Could you remind me what you finished on there? You're a hockey player and you missed out on.
Yeah, just the open-mindedness or lack thereof earlier on, and my view of things that were unknown. I think that was kind of the main context of it, of like what I believe to be true. Why I believe that to be true. Any of this triggering any thoughts?
A little bit. It's triggering it's triggering the recollection that you can post-produce and edit.
There's no post-producing this stuff. Episode 1 of the interviews are just gonna flow, man. It's just gonna flow.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a journey, and you know, right now in Slovakia, they're very anti-cannabis. The Czech Republic's a different story. So when I'm here, I don't have any cannabis at all, and I'm not drinking at all. I'm straight stone cold sober, navigating the trials and tribulations of COVID in Slovakia, which I find out to be a blessing, quite frankly, because there is a certain aspect of drinking and drugs and working and sex and anything that can form an addiction is a distraction. It's a tool to fill a void, or to avoid a void. And so it's nice to not have that. And so like now I'm working on ReHabit. I'm filling the void with, like, I was up at 3:30 this morning. And I started my first meditation at 4 a.m. And I don't have a long log line. This is my little journal on wins. And so I journal in here every day how I won that day in different practice windows. And, some days I get up and some days I don't, but my intention is to every day. And I'm assuming one day I will. It feels to me like that's the way I can get to where I want to get to with all this, rather than giving myself some mandate that like a line in the sand, your life is better. You are now a meditator at 5 a.m. It just feels impossible to fulfill that expectation. So that's been really part of this journey I'm on now, is to discover how behaviors change, when and how people seek change in their lives and lifestyles, and the tools we can use to facilitate those changes on really, really profound levels, but also small ones like, I want to be more present with my daughter, or big ones like, let's move to Slovakia in the middle of a pandemic.
Well, that's actually maybe a good opportunity for us to speak about our early entrepreneurial business years up until now, and kind of what's driving you and what you're doing in your project right now, because there's another line in that outro that I have as a part of my show, which is trust that you're exactly where you're supposed to be right now. And I know if we look back over 15 years of I'm this sales guy that's on this path of selling semi trucks for the rest of my life and making 200 grand a year, but hating every moment of it, to having this guy, Mike Olaski, come back into my life and go, here, read this 4-hour work week book. And me going, what the, like this exists in the world. You could travel. And then, dude, I remember reading a book, and I always forget about it. I actually got to go buy it again because I don't have it physically anymore. But remember the Lonely Planet guidebooks that you used to take with you, the physical books? There's an autobiography written by that guy and his wife where they talk about how they started the business, and then their journey of like traveling from England down through like Kandahar and like Afghanistan and into Southeast Asia and into Australia. And then they created this business, and it's kind of like the early points of like travel blogs, and then what became now like, all these other things like Expedia and everything else. It's like, it's crazy to think, but there was a driver for that for me too. I remember reading that book and going, I want to live that life. I want to live that life. I will live that life, but at first it was, I want to live that life. And then it was, I will live that life. And now it's a constant reminder for me too, to say, I am living that life. I am living that life. I'm already there. I'm already on the beach, even if I'm not physically there. But the idea of intention and just creating that, that space for yourself to be comfortable exactly where you are. Like you said, you're in Slovakia right now, which is not a third world country, but it's certainly not, the United States or Canada either, right? Like it's maybe behind in a few ways. And I know, it's been
in a lot of ways. We're dead last in air pollution, dead last in the EU.
Yeah.
But they have all the creature comforts of every it sounds derogatory, but first world countries, US or Canada, advanced countries. So they have everything, but they're also still suffering from a social mindset, from a social belief structure. It's very obvious. It reminds me of being in Korea. As you probably know, Korea War was in the 50s. And so the products of the survivors of post-Korean War coming from that separation of the Korean peninsula create a really dramatic social shift from the 7-year-olds, the 30-year-olds, and the 15-year-olds. And they all, the 15-year-olds were like all westernized, and the 50-year-olds were all like totally bogged down in the past. And the 30-year-olds were just in between, lost a bit. And I feel like that's the true for Slovakia right now as well. They're still struggling with their post-communist roots. It was only 1990, I think, when they broke away, and Czechoslovakia became Czech Republic and Slovakia. But it's going back to intention. It's really important, and thank you for reminding me. There's another flagship piece in ReHabit. This is the prototype. This one says lies, Liiz. And the 3 I's stand for intention, inspiration, and initiation. And again, that goes back to the scientific prayer. So intention is your visualization. The inspiration is your emotionalization, and the initiation is the actualization. So have a picture, call up an emotion, and then feel it in your body, and then take steps in that direction. So this chapter here is a mango orchard in Costa Rica.
Yep.
I don't know if you can, that's upside down. And
It's
it says,
down, but I got it. Yeah.
it says homestead on it.
Mm.
And so there are 7 of these. I started with 12. And so the idea is that this journal that I'm designing, and this is based off of other people's work. I'm standing on the shoulders of giants largely in my work, but there's another one here. And this one says graceful family. And this one is a woman, you know, coaching or talking to another woman. And that is my anchor to my wife feeling fulfilled in her career, and therefore us in our family as well.
Yeah.
This one is Hollow Van.
That's a sweet van, man.
It is a sweet van. And I won't get into the hollow part, other than to say that it's it goes with the other hollow in my deck here. This one is Ola Surf. So this one reminds me that I want to be an athlete. I want to get back to being an athlete. And I want to get back to being in the water. Plus, I want to use those hydrofoils.
Dude, I bought a blow up stand-up paddleboard just to get back onto the water and start working on balance and stuff, just to train myself, you know, knowing that there's no waves here.
You're actualizing. That's part of the actualizing. So totally. This one is a rap party. And what this one's teaching me is that I want to be part of a team, and I want to complete a major project, right? And so what is that? A feature film? I don't know, something. This one here is open mic. And so that's me playing my guitar in front of people and singing like I want them to hear me.
In case anybody watching and listening can't tell, Mike's a bit of a word wizard.
And I forget, this is going to be an audio podcast, so I'm not describing. This one says hollow pod. And so the visualization component, like I've got a vision for how to actually create these visual stimuli. But this project, then you got these 7 things, and then I got this journal. And in this, I call it prescribing. So you go and you draw a script of that scene. You write it out as if you're writing a script for a story for somebody. And then this book's broken into like 40 pages per section. And then you rewrite it the next day. And rewrite it the next day. Of course, you got 7 of them, so it could take months and months to fill this up. But the idea is that your vision becomes so clear to you, and that you can call out emotions that feels like smells that you can smell in the vision. And then, like you just did, if you can take steps to actualize it, get a paddleboard, you know? Imagine yourself paddling when you're doing yoga or something, right?
Well, even having the kids on the board, like they were playing around with it in the basement suite here, which is right behind me right now. But they hopped up on it and they grabbed the oar and stuff, and they were just so excited about it, you know. And like, I know, like we got a hot tub last year, a year ago, because the intention was for us to actually go to Costa Rica, but we should be there already, you know. And then coronavirus hits and the world locks down, and we were just like, let's just wait a couple years, which is fine. Exactly. Going back again, like it's exactly what's supposed to happen right now. This is totally happening for a reason. But that was one of the other things, is seeing the kids on the board. I was like, I'm going to start to create this love of the water. And getting the hot tub was part of it. Is like they shut down the local pool, no more swimming lessons. We had the kids booked in swimming lessons a year ago this time, and they couldn't go. Like they're not learning how to do laps in our hot tub, but I see both kids now dunking themselves under the water and laughing, you know, like that's stage 1 of learning how to love being in the water, right? It's got to start with the very first step. So there's a lot of that happening, but I love those. For anybody that's just listening, Mike was holding up these cards that were related to a journal, essentially, that's, you know, creating that vision and that intention. And those visuals are really good. And I like that you're giving them your own spin on names and stuff too. That obviously fits well into how you do everything as well.
Well, and there's some instruction that goes along with it. They're basically just photos, right? So maybe some of your listeners would have heard of something called mind movies. So back when mind movies first came out, I want to do that. What they're doing isn't good enough, and they've improved it a bit, but they're basically just a slide deck, of pictures. That it's just a mood board, a vision board where you can piece on the board pictures. And that's all these are for you. Anyone who's listening is, just find a picture online that resonates for you, that can aid you in getting into the emotional space so that you can actually get on that little ladder from visualization to emotionalization to actualization. And they're actually, I don't know if you noticed, but they're the size of a checkbook, and the size of a phone, basically. And so I want to carry that around in my phone case. And so on the back of each card, there will be a little cheat sheet, little trigger words to help me call up that visual and that emotion. So for me, this is emerging, and you wanted me to start touching on what I'm doing now, but the project's called ReHabit. There's plenty of aspects to it.
Let's dive straight into that right now, because Mike, I just realized I've got 2006 to today that I still want to talk about. So we're going to do a whole nother interview because we're going to run out of time on this one. But today, let's wrap things for today to talk about ReHabit. Let's dive into it and talk about the vision of it. And
okay, sounds good. But I need to quickly think, what's between 2006 and today? 2008, we opened one website.
I'll tell you, it's one website. It's all that experience, the master cleanse, you going to Costa Rica, 2008 to 2009, where we didn't really even talk at all, hardly. Sport Fan Connect, the Olympics, going to Hawaii in 2012 and surfing for 3 weeks. You handing me Dispenza's book in 2013, The Habit of Being Yourself, me opening it 5 years later. Traffic and conversion conference we went to in San Francisco, and the shape of how that impacted us from a digital marketing perspective. LinkedIn to leads becoming what it did. 2018 to 2021 with your family, your mom, your dad, your brother.
Oh,
Trump.
Yeah.
All of that stuff.
Trump. No way. We can't talk
and that's
about
why I say, there's no way we're going to talk about all this stuff in the next 15 minutes.
No, we couldn't even talk about one more. We couldn't even talk about one more of those things, but I will touch on one as a bridge to ReHabit. And that is from one website, we were building we had a website development company together. And my idea, maybe unbeknownst to Trevor, but I think I beknownst him as much as I could, where I wanted to basically abstract myself out. I mean, one of the first books I gave you was E-Myth. I didn't want to be the conventional entrepreneur. I kind of wanted you to launch this business for Trevor, and I could go and surf and he would run the business, and I would end up being a minority partner. He would be the majority, and it'd be his business and I'd own 10%. That's what I kind of thought might happen. Before we got there, we started deciding to go our separate ways, but I had in the meantime launched the Master Cleanse. And it was along the lines of feeding this 4-hour work week. Like, I had this idea, Freedom 35. There was this retirement plan in Canada called Freedom 55. I was like, fuck that. I want to retire way sooner. I was 33 or 32 or something at the time. And I was like, by 35, I'm moving to Costa Rica and I'm going to learn to surf. And by 35, I did. So talk about setting intentions. Likewise, Trevor, like when I moved to Spain, I found a spot in Spain where the surf looked good. I found a town. I zoomed in. I took photos. I had it built in my head what that was going to be, and then it became. And that's happened over and over and over in life, that you got to actually take that step.
Hey, sweetie.
I'm doing an interview right now, and we're recording it.
You lost a tooth, hey?
Mm-hmm.
One tooth or two tooths?
She's lost five tooths already, but this one's taking its time coming in.
Oh, holy cow. You're getting so big. We got to get you on a phone call with Logan. You guys can just talk. We'll just leave you in a room with your iPads.
See, it's a special book. Look, when you open it, here. Look.
Oh, that's cool.
Look.
Little book that says, I love you. Look at, I'll show Trevor.
See, is that
Oh, nice.
literal?
Holy,
Look.
you're a good drawer. That says dad on it. And love.
Yep. I love you.
Holy cow.
I love
So
you, sweetie.
creative.
Thanks for sharing that with me. Okay, go give it to Mom. I'll be right up.
Gotta be
Close the
done
door behind you,
soon.
please. So working from home and ReHabit, I'll come back to tying that in, but ReHabit's about self, family, community, society, and these integral parts, these holistic parts. And so the life I'm trying to recreate for myself now and re-intend is about how to actually still be present with what comes up, right? Like, and not have those moments of like perfection, disrupted. The call is no longer valuable or something like that, right? Like shooting her out of here.
Yeah.
So that's part of the challenge, and I love it. I actually kept her in one of my YouTube videos I posted recently. I was just like, that's what happened, so that's what's in.
Totally, man.
Yeah.
And that's in fact, that's one of the other intentions I'm creating for this too, is that yes, I'll set myself up in an environment to like make sure that it's quiet and the lighting's good and the audio's good and all that kind of stuff. But like whatever happens. My kids come running in the middle of the interview with Joe Rogan. So freaking be it, man.
And
anybody that would get or an ayahuasca conversation or whatever, but anybody that would be insulted by it or whatever, like that world I feel left us behind or was left behind a year ago, right? I still think of that guy's interview where his kid comes in a little roller, and he literally puts his hand on the kid's head and just like pushes it down, right? But that was like the catalyst moments of like what was about to become normal, which is people coming in, like every meeting that we have internally with our company, like somebody's kids talking or crying or something in the background. And, for a while, you could kind of see, leadership, I guess you'd call it, like more senior people in the company, executives that would, kind of frown on it and like, let's figure it out. But then eventually it was like, oh, we need to help our people figure this out. And we need to become adaptable to say, this is normal now. I don't care if you work for a bank or if you're just an entrepreneur that's hopping on a webinar, like that's new reality.
Or you're live on MSNBC. Like so many times I see a talking head interviewing someone and their kids rolling by, or it's cool. But so anyway, Grace is named Grace for gratitude and to help me remember. And so it's a really great reminder. And so I just, honest to God, she's my easiest, quickest way into presence and gratitude. So I generally don't miss an opportunity to reconnect in that energy as soon as she's in my presence.
Yeah.
But so Freedom 35 allowed me to quit working. Basically, I moved to Costa Rica and I had this website, The Master Cleanse, Passive Revenue Perfect Storm, very much in line with everything we've talked about today. And I milked that cow for 5 years at least, and didn't really nurture it. Definitely have some regrets on how much more it could have been. I say regrets with an asterisk because, intellectually, I don't think regrets is the right way to go, but I still have some emotion around it. Like I could have been so much more, kind of like how I feel about hockey too. But it was the perfect thing to bring me to where I am now. And there was a lot of ups and downs and rollers and learners and along the way. And in the end, where I'm at now is there's actually a master cleansing brand. And in the master cleansing brand, the newest cleanse we're producing is called the Lifestyle Cleanse. And the Lifestyle Cleanse dovetails and launches ReHabit. And so ReHabit is a life-changing system. And certainly there's lots of tools out there to change and books and resources on people who've changed their lives and how they might suggest you go about changing your life. But my approach is that it's a lifelong membership. Like I want to have talk about lifetime value. I want to have my members stay with us for life because life is always changing. And you got a new set of changes coming up around the corner. Just by the time you've settled into the last crisis you survived and changed through, you have a brand new one to deal with, whether it's passing of their parent, which I've recently experienced twice, and or a business failing, or a foreclosure, or a bankruptcy, or a divorce, or an illness, or a diagnosis, or changing a job, or changing careers, or having a kid. These common life events are common for a reason, in that they're universal. We all experience them, at least the majority of them. And so the idea is, like, how do we develop a set of tools to navigate these changes a little bit more gracefully? And so it was born out of my need to change, because the tools I had that brought me to where I was just weren't cutting it anymore. The way I looked at myself, the way I interacted with my family and my work, they got me so far. I do pretty well as a consultant, and I built some businesses that have sold for 6 figures, and, never a grand slam, but, a couple home runs and a whole bunch of doubles. Like, I got gap power. But
not enough to make the Diggers team, but.
Oh, I made the Diggers team. I made it.
Okay.
I quit.
You made the Diggers team.
I did. I quit. I
you
left.
You were the DH, right? Or did they let you in the field too?
Oh, I was in the field. I made a great running catch and almost dropped it. And then, but I did catch it. And
I threw that one out there so that Matty say when he saw this, he could have a good little chuckle.
Oh, I had a double my first time up, first at bat, and then I had a double my second at bat, and then I kind of went downhill from there. They started throwing me some curveballs.
Oh yeah.
And I only saw like 10 pitchers. Just a little bit of quickly backstory. I hadn't played baseball in like 20 years, 20, and these guys were like senior baseball players, like we were senior hockey players, so they're all pretty good, right? And I was pretty good when I was a teenager, but 20 years, the difference between 16 and 35 is a big fucking difference. Like, my arm was so out of shape that I would either nail it into the ground or fly it through in the air like Chuck Knobloch. And, but anyway, it was great. I'm really happy about that experience, in fact. But I couldn't hit the curve. And that was right about the time where one website was ending and I was heading to Costa Rica. So I just walked away from it.
Yeah. So you were basically the Serrano of Major League on the Diggers.
Yeah, I was. Yeah.
So all right, I digress. Yeah.
But ReHabit's, I'm really excited about it. And I'm nervous about it. And I think that's a good sign because it's challenging me. I'm certainly outside of my comfort zone. I'm there's app deploying. I'm scrambling a little bit. I managed to be able to downsize, let go of my clients, capitalize on some COVID grants. Like, things have seemed to conspire to create this opportunity for me to do this right now. And quite frankly, it feels like I have to do it. Like, it really does. I won't share all the details about my personal journey, but I'll just say this, that like all of you, I have challenges. Some of them, seem overwhelming at times. And so I'm seeking a community and resources and a muse, a passion that I can dig into and actually have that wrap party, like on my visualize board there, where I build a team. Maybe I'm not the leader all the way through, I don't know, but I want it to have weight. And I don't know how it'll get to where it's going to go, but I want it to bring me into a creative space more than a technical space. And it's allowing me to do that right now. So I'm really excited about it. Trevor's going to be in my first class. Like, I'm his first interview. And I keep postponing when I'm going to send out that invite, Trevor, because I want it to have enough there that you will actually engage with it a little bit.
Yeah. Well, let's dive further into that in part 2 of our interview, because like we already talked about, there's a lot of stories and little fuses that kind of make up the journey that got us both to this place and where that inspiration for ReHabit came from. And obviously we could spend probably a good half an hour just discussing the details of it, but I'll wrap on this though, Mike, because everything is intentional right now. I wanted to just say it's crazy how this happens, but like, I know exactly why this is all happening. It's because I'm creating the space to be able to learn and to consume and stuff. For the longest time, I've been pushing away podcasts. Like, I'm like, nope, no new ideas. I don't want to hear what anybody else is talking about. Let me just go create instead of consuming. And that's a whole other topic we can talk about. But in doing research for this podcast, and then this first interview with you, and how to be a better interviewer, and what kind of questions to ask, I was diving into Tim Ferriss's stuff. And one of his feature interviews on his YouTube channel is with Brene Brown. And he asked Brene Brown, he actually framed it like this. He says, so first of all, let me tell you, he says, my girlfriend asked me this morning who my guest was going to be. And I said, oh, it's Brene Brown. And she was like, jaw on the floor, like, Brene Brown? And he's like, yeah. And then he said he ran into another woman in the lobby of his building, and same kind of reaction, right? It's like, oh my God, you're interviewing Brene Brown? So he asked her, he says, why do you think that is? And she's like, I have no idea. And that was kind of the end of it. And he's like, okay, well, let me reframe this. He goes, is there anything that comes up for you that like makes you feel like your story or your, you know, the way that you approach things is different, that kind of triggers in people? She goes, no, you know what? I do know what it is. She says, it's because of the science and the proof and all of that stuff of what I've done as a scientist. And of course, the popularity of her top 5 TED Talk that is about vulnerability. But she said, the thing that I think makes people like jaw drop and be like, oh, amazing, Brene Brown, is because she tells the real truth. And she speaks about it in her own perspective, right? Like Brene Brown, she literally said right there, she's like, this shit's hard. Like being a mom, being a wife, being a thought leader, being somebody that's trying to, you know, stay at the top of their game and constantly learn and share what they're learning and inspire other people. She said, it's exhausting. And it's hard and it's messy and it sucks a lot of days. And most of the time it's like, it's easier to just grab a glass of wine or a beer or drugs or whatever to just kind of numb yourself out. But I just wanted to end with that, leading into part 2, to kind of speak about what you just said, which is like ReHabit is more than an idea. It's got pieces to it. It's already taking shape. And quite frankly, it's something that's been building for 15 years, and it will release into the world, and it's going to be messy and it's going to be ugly and it's going to be incomplete and it's constantly going to evolve. But wherever it is perfect right now. So just wanted to say that out loud. And I look forward to talking about part 2, because like I said, we got about better part of 12 years to go through to kind of lead us to like what brought us to ReHabit and all the stuff that you're up to right now. So with that, we'll shut her down on interview 1. We'll see you guys on the next one.
All right, Char. Thanks a lot, man. I really appreciate you. Love you, bud. Bye-bye.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of the Trevor Turnbull Show. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you did, please consider subscribing on my YouTube channel and on your favorite podcast platform, and leave me a review. I'd love to hear from you. Now, until next time, remember, today is a beautiful day of opportunity. Trust that you're exactly where you're supposed to be right now. So be grateful, be curious, and be brave.